The following is a presentation of the High Spot Podcast. Making their way to the ring, talking about the world of professional wrestling, the team of Jeff Martin and the trendsetter Brian Perga, the Jersey Wrecking Crew.
And you are listening to the High Spot Podcast. I am your host, the trendsetter Brian Brega. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. Got a special guest, Teal Piper, the daughter of the legendary Hall of Famer Rowdy Piper. We have her on the show as well. Before we get into that, don't forget to catch our show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, as well as Spreaker. We're part of bodyslam.net. You can also follow the High Spot Podcast and our shenanigans on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at High Spot Podcast, as well as our website, highspotpodcast.com. My goodness, guys, weeks gone by and a lot of things have changed. My tag team partner, the Scoundrel, Jeff Martin's missing MIA right now. He'll be back next week as we break down Night of Champions and just a lot of stuff going on. I mean, when Jeff and I first started this, we never thought we'd be able to talk about other promotions outside of WWE. Now, you know, through nobody's fault, and it's not done intentionally, and people might think it's because, the product's kind of lacking right now and people aren't as interested in it anymore. That has not to do with the case. We love talking about WWE. We love looking at the positive aspects of it, but at the same time, it's kind of in a way taking a backseat because, we've been talking about all the other promotions too. As our guest, we're going to have on the show in a few minutes, Teal Piper, who's going to make her debut for WOW, Women of Wrestling, on Access TV, and that's really exciting. But she actually made her first debut at AEW's event, All Out in Chicago, Illinois, that Jeff and I were very thankful to be a part of, and saw her there in the Casino Battle Royale, Women's Battle Royal, and it was amazing for her to make her first debut match in front of 10,000 people. Can you imagine that? I mean, most people, they're in front of maybe a couple hundred people, or, at the same time, maybe 1,000, and there's a lot of pressure there because you don't want to mess up, you want to look good, all these nerves going in you. I can only imagine, but in front of 10,000 screaming, die-hardcore wrestling fans in Chicago, Illinois, that's got to be intimidating. God bless her. I know I couldn't do that, so she did it too, and she did a great job in the Battle Royale. I'm sure she wished she could have stayed a little bit longer than she was, but at the same time, just to be part and participate in a historic event like that, it's got to be a huge honor and huge boost for her confidence as she starts building it as her career continues on. But before we get into the interview, guys, like I said, it's amazing that nowadays we're talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling. We'll talk about Ring of Honor. We'll talk about Impact. We'll talk about MLW most likely in the near future, too. I know we haven't really spoken too much about it, but that's definitely something that Jeff and I want to dive into. Just unfortunately now, there's not so many hours in the day, and Jeff and I are always hustling and bustling, trying to do other things to kind of benefit ourselves, to benefit the show, too. And again, we appreciate the enthusiasm and the support that the crew have for us. We wouldn't be here without you guys, and basically it's something that, it's a labor of love, and we love doing it, so we want to be a part of it more and more, but now it seems like there are not enough hours in the day to either talk about it or to be a part and participate in it, so it's like you have to pick and choose your spots and your moments, and it's pretty cool and pretty interesting. It could be a lot worse, right? So, it's great to have Jeff on last week. We spoke about, obviously, All Out, and, we had Brad Shepard on, which is great to have him on and kind of get his intake on it as well, and just reflecting back on it now as we talk to Teal Piper here, and we're going to have her on in a few seconds. What an amazing time it is to be a wrestling fan. I know I say a lot of times, guys, and it becomes kind of boring, and I know it's the popular thing to say, but it's in all reality the same thing, and I use the analogy, it's like Baskin-Robbins. I know Jeff hates it when I say it, but you know what? Jeff isn't here, so he doesn't have to listen to it if he doesn't want to. I don't have to see his smart aleck remark back at me for saying it, but it is kind of true. You have just so many more options nowadays. And now that AEW is going to be on TNT coming up pretty shortly in the month of October, and then you have, NXT moving on to Wednesdays as well, now live on the USA Network, it just seems, despite what anybody wants to say or talk about, and I know the popular thing is to either say, AEW is a legit competition against the WWE, or that they're not even in that playing field. I think when people have that argument/discussion, they're missing the point, I feel, because the point really isn't the fact that AEW will one day overtake the WWE, or that's their goal, to put them out of business like the Monday Night Wars. Completely different eras, completely different stories, completely different agendas as well. I think AEW just really wants to be that alternative. And what I like about AEW compared to when you've seen, with all the respects to, Impact Wrestling, right? Or what New Japan Pro Wrestling is trying to do now, I don't think ideally they're worried about what WWE is doing. They really want to just stick to their own identity. First of all, they want to create their own identity, and they just want to stick to what they're doing and not pay attention too much about what other people are doing. I think if you go with that concept, if you want to debate the fact, well, will that lead to possibly somehow taking the number one spot from the juggernaut, the machine, which is WWE? It could be a discussion for another time, and it's definitely a long time from now if that's going to happen. But I think it's also up for discussion too that nowadays you don't have to necessarily see everything live. When back in my day, with the day of VHS, guys, and I'm really dating myself here, you really had to see WCW and WWE at the same time. I mean, unless you had two TVs and you could go to different rooms or in the same room, that was really highly unlikely if you have two TVs in the same room. You would have to go back and forth to watch Raw and then go back and watch Nitro. But usually for us, we would switch and change between commercial breaks and get whatever little bit we could, and we'd find out what happened later on as the next weeks progressed. So it's a little different nowadays with the internet and streaming and social media because if I miss an episode of Raw, it's not because I want to miss the 3-hour Raw, and I missed the one in Madison Square Garden to watch that show live. I have the ability now of going on YouTube or going on my phone and rewatching the whole show and really not missing out on anything. As opposed to if you miss a couple of weeks, you really have to go back and find what you missed out on, and you're so far behind. But in this case, everybody has the ability of tuning in. And I'll say one more thing before we get to our interview, guys. And this is something I mentioned to Jeff too, and I want to just refocus on this thing that I heard, that when CM Punk was on StarCast, he made one of the best points I've ever heard him make. He's made some pretty good ones, but this one is really true when it comes to how fans, how people in the podcasting world, how people in general in the media want to talk about this in terms of all right, come Wednesday nights in October, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose WWE? Are you going to choose AEW? Are you going to choose this or that? What are you going to do? And the reality is you don't have to choose. We have the ability now as fans and people that are covering this, the greediness of wanting it all. And we can have it all now because we just have that ability with technology being the way it is now. I don't have to sit in my chair in front of my couch or, in my living room and sit there and watch AEW and say, I'm only watching AEW, or no, I'm a WWE loyalist. I'm just going to watch WWE. I'm not going to give AEW ratings or vice versa, whatever excuse you want to use. You can watch both. And that's the amazing thing now. I suppose that you don't have to pick sides. You can if you want to. You're entitled to if you want to as well, if you want to choose sides. But you have the freedom and the luxury now of just enjoying it all. Being greedy, being the proverbial kid in the candy store, having all the options available to you. You don't have to worry about getting your hand caught in the cookie jar because you know what? It's there for you. That's the reason. The jar is there, and we're just enjoying every bit of the treats, which is professional wrestling, why we love it so much. So enough about that, guys. We'll dive more into that, like I said, next week when Jeff comes back on. We'll talk about Night of Champions as the whole events of Madison Square Garden. A pretty historic night in Madison Square Garden. Real quick, as a side note here, I know we're going to move on, but again, I just caught me off guard when I think about it. The historic significance of how long it's taken WWE to go back to do a Raw and a SmackDown in the same building, and to have Stone Cold Steve Austin open up the event, and then you had The Undertaker the next night on SmackDown Live, and something I took from it more was the road down memory lane that Stone Cold talked about when he was in Madison Square Garden at Survivor Series facing Bret the Hitman Hart, and then at SummerSlam facing Undertaker, Highway to Hell, and the significance and the history of that match and the history of that building when it comes to not just pro wrestling but WWE as well. And have The Undertaker, and I have to admit, guys, and I'm not ashamed to say it, that when The Undertaker was out there, he wasn't his classic Undertaker self where he was saying creatures of the night and all that stuff. That's cool and all, but he was it really felt to me it was Mark Calloway talking. He was dressed as The Undertaker, but it was him talking. And what really got to me, I know I'm going to butcher it because I don't know it verbatim, but he basically said, it's good to come home, but he also is realistic of the fact that he doesn't know how many more times he's going to be able to come home. And that to me was the first time The Undertaker's ever really kind of become mortal in a sense, because he's kind of acknowledging the fact now that the road is dwindling. I know many people say, it's dwindled, or the sunset has been on his career for many years now previous to this, but now he's acknowledging the fact that maybe his time in the ring is now surely coming to an end. So it hit me pretty hard there, because as much as I knew it was a reality, and the time we were in Orlando, that was possibly Undertaker's final match, and you could hear pin drop fall in that building. It was worse. It was as quiet as when Undertaker lost the streak in New Orleans at WrestleMania 30. It was that quiet. Grown adults crying their eyes out because they grew up watching The Undertaker, and it was a piece of their childhood that they thought, at that time at least, was over. And of course, he's wrestled significantly more after that. We've seen that. But now, more than ever, after that SmackDown Live show in the Garden, for him to finally, for the first time in my opinion, and if I'm incorrect, you guys can correct me on it, hit us up on social media at the High Spot Podcast to tell me if I'm wrong. That's the first time I've ever heard Taker publicly live on air acknowledge the fact that his final days are fast approaching, because he doesn't know how many more times he's going to be able to quote-unquote come home. So that really hit me. I really got emotional knowing that, okay, there is now finally some finality here. And I think, it's not a sad tears, but more of, wow, look all that he's accomplished, all he's done in his career, and how much gratitude I have as a fan, as I'm sure many others do, for all he's done in the wrestling industry. So that hit me hard. I would say, although I didn't watch all the shows completely, saw bits and pieces of it, I do intend to watch them back again. Pretty nice way of leading into the go home shows for Night of Champions, where you have a lot of things to talk about. The Universal title is going to be on the line from two tag team champions, from the Raw tag team champions Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman, who will also be defending the Raw tag team titles. The whole issue now with the women's championship, with the Raw women's championship now with with Sasha and Becky Lynch. They combine their names together as one word, #Seshi. And then you have Charlotte and Bayley. And then, the King of the Ring finals, something that, Jeff was a huge fan of. I was a huge fan of before as well. And now you have the ability of seeing a final now, of crowning a new King of the Ring, which, God, we haven't said that in the longest time, or even talked about the King of the Ring in the longest time. So that's pretty interesting and cool to see too. So a lot of stuff, obviously, we wanted to talk about this week. Haven't had a chance to. Our schedules are what they are. But again, looking forward to, doing the post show in terms of post reaction and talking about how everything has led up to the conclusion of Night of Champions and who's going to end up on top of all those matches that we will be discussing definitely next week, and looking forward to it, because you know what, we're leading into the fall here in the metropolitan area, and before you know it, I've already gotten an email. I don't know if you guys have gotten it, for Royal Rumble tickets in Houston, Texas. I mean, seriously now? We're talking about Royal Rumble? We even haven't done Survivor Series yet, and we're talking about the Royal Rumble. This is crazy. Time goes by way too fast. But somebody's time was just started is somebody who's I'm sure a lot of people have been looking forward to. I know I've been looking forward to, when I've heard, talks of that she was going to make her debut and signed with WOW, Women of Wrestling, and they have a great TV deal on Access TV. Guys, check it out. We've had guests on the show before, like Santana Garrett, right, and her talking about it. Barbie Hayden, who was Abigail Maverick, on the show as well, and I wish Barbie Hayden so much luck in her future endeavors, taking herself away from wrestling now and moving on to something else she's passionate about. It was a pleasure always having her on the show and talking to her for a bit, as we did. And now Teal Piper will now take her rightful place on that roster, which is stacked right now. And I think the big question now for Teal will be not necessarily the questions about, the comparison of the legacies and how she'll be compared to her Hall of Fame father, the one and only Roddy Piper, but now her trying to set up her own path and her own legacy of what she wants to do in her career. Did a lot of acting and, wasn't initially driven to want to be in this business, but then eventually kind of found her way back into the industry, which her father made very famous. And so it's cool to see the dynamic. Jeff did a great job with the interview and talked to Teal Piper here on the High Spot Podcast. So without further ado, guys, the newest signee of WOW, Women of Wrestling on Access TV, guys, is the debut for their second season. Fast approaches. None other than Teal Piper on the High Spot Podcast.
All right, excited to have Teal Piper with us. Teal, how are you doing today? You make your debut for Women of Wrestling WOW in the upcoming days. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. Are you excited? Is the anticipation mounting? How do you feel right now?
I am excited. I've been watching their first season of the show, and then the new season that has started to premiere. So I'm getting very hyped up to see all these girls in the ring live and get out there myself.
They made their debut on September 7th, second season. How did it all begin? How were you approached to sign? What made you sign? Just tell us the backstory.
Well, I knew I wanted to start getting in the ring and training and all that. I was looking for a place in Los Angeles to start doing it regularly. A mutual friend of ours, Barry Bloom, put me in contact with David McLean. And, they told me about the WOW Training Center out of Long Beach, and it just sounded so perfect. So I went and checked it out, and they were very gracious and let me train with them for a while. And then I just fell in love with the company and knew I had to sign with them.
Jeannie Buss is the owner. How does it feel to know that a woman owner is behind this, women's revolution, women's movement, women's wrestling? How do you feel to have such a woman who shows a lot of empowerment, the owner of the Lakers, to be part of this wrestling company?
I think it's really awesome. I haven't got the privilege to meet her yet, but I've just the fact that she's supporting WOW so much, and they've gone through so much as a company to be here today, and they're offering such a great product. It's just I think it's really cool. I can't wait to actually get to meet her in person and shake her hand.
You're the daughter of the legendary Roddy Piper, wrestling royalty. How hard is it for you to kind of step out of the shadow and be your own person, or do you embrace that when people refer to you as Roddy Piper's daughter? Is there a lot of pressure for you to carry out that legacy?
Yeah, there's always pressure on that. For me, I think I try to embrace it, at least right now in my career, because it was something I tried to avoid for so long in my life, and I'm just now at a point where I'm like, okay, embracing it, which is why I'm using the Piper name in wrestling. It just felt weird not to. But there's no longevity in being Roddy Piper's daughter. It needs to be something that my career can progress and I can make my own footprints and not just be a lesser version of my dad. So I've been struggling trying to make my own mark on the industry, and as I think a lot of legacy children do.
You got a lot of good examples. I mean, Charlotte Flair, you got Tessa Blanchard out there that have done a great job being their own person, yet carrying on the legacy. Is there anything that you maybe have learned from them that you're using now?
That's a great question. I feel like a lot of the people you just mentioned are doing such a great job. Like Charlotte Flair, I think really found a good balance using nods to her dad and then making her own career. I know Cody Rhodes doesn't often like to talk or interview about his dad, from what I can tell, just because he's trying to be his own person. And that's something that I look up to as far as how he's handling his career as well. It's something that you have to get off of it and move on at some point, and it has to be your career. So both of them, I think, are great examples and people that, I hope to have even half the career that they're having right now.
What from being around women of wrestling from WOW, what are you learning so far? What's been the hardest adjustment so far when you're training with them? What's been the hardest adjustment?
I mean, you're going to professional sports. There's no halving that. It's intense. It's mostly the physical training and doing it every day and getting hurt or being sore and getting back in the ring and continuing forward. I went from doing music and acting to being a professional athlete. So for me, it's the changes in your body and it's the meeting the demand. And yeah, I do suppose there's a little bit of me who's genetically disposed to it at some level, but it's, there's nothing like getting muscle memory and getting it in your body. And that's just a steep curve that you have to work very, very hard at. And so that's been my main focus. And obviously the point of which I struggle the most to try to be up to par on.
Obviously, a lot of people are going to look at your promos that you do, and they're going to, again, compare you to your dad's. I've seen some of the promos. You have that little pause that your dad does too, that puts the emphasis on what you just said before. Uncanny. How much do you think acting has helped you out as far as promos and so far in your time in WOW?
I think with acting, it's helped me just be comfortable with myself and be comfortable being out of your shell or whatever on camera and in front of an audience. But as far as my persona in the ring, Teal Piper, that to me isn't acting as much as it is just this flip side of me. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a Gemini, or maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it's just this dark side of me that I just don't control anymore. You know, I get out there and I just have that side come out of me without consequence in the ring, and it's very therapeutic. And I think we all take on traits of our parents. So if there's parts of it that remind you of promos my dad did, first of all, that's super flattering. But it's also, I think, just, you know, from growing up, hanging out with him and talking like him and picking up little things. But I hope that my promos also end up something that are completely different and new and fresh, and something that is missing in wrestling right now. So hopefully I offer just as much Teal Piper as anything else.
Teal, you're getting in a time where social media is, goes crazy. You have your own resume on video, on Instagram, on Twitter. Your matches can be seen all around the world. Your promos, when you had your press conference, a lot of media attention towards that. The boom in wrestling is crazy. In October, we're going to have they say it's alleged wrestling war again. Just your thoughts on the business now and what a boom it's been in since about maybe a few years ago, and how there's just so much access towards social media.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things I'm aware of is the change with women in the industry. And, it wasn't that long ago that women were coming out sort of in accessories, having cat fights, and not really real wrestling, and not getting the opportunity to showcase how skilled they actually were in the ring. I mean, I do feel that women at that time were incredibly skilled and not being used to their full resources and stuff in the ring. So as far as the movement and everything with that, it is a big part of why I've joined wrestling at this point in my life. I just saw the direction it's taken him in, and it made me want to join even more and be a part of that. I missed, what was the second part of that question?
Oh, just I know it's a great answer, but the boom in wrestling. How do you think it's been crazy, right? It's just been like another. You had the Attitude Era. There was a boom there, and then you had the reality era, and now you got kind of like the social media era now with wrestling. Now how there's such a boom for it, or such a craze for it now.
Absolutely, I think. One thing that I think is really cool in this time in wrestling is the fact with social media and everything is it's a very useful tool. It is a way to get heat. It is a way to cut individual promos and get people hyped up. And it's something that I think that had social media and that whole outlet been around back in the 80s, I think the wrestlers would have used that just as much. I think it's a very unique industry to where you can kind of bring the performance outside of the live events and outside of TV on a smaller scale into social media and use that to your benefit, where most other people in entertainment, they tend to save face on social media. They tend to just go there to be very politically correct and, just kind of connect a little bit with their fans. But in wrestling, it's like only entertainment that I can think of where they can go on there with their personas and add to the future matches and create heat or, create promos and interact with their friends and really be their personas. And I think that that's a really unique and cool thing that it offers in today's time.
Wow Wrestling has a very great roster. When you look at it, a lot of people who are going to be very well known in the future, including yourself. I mean, when you take a look at that roster, what's one of the first things you think about?
First thing I think about is, wow, I got a lot of hard matches ahead of me if I want a championship.
It's a tough path. It's a tough road.
Yeah, there's so many awesome, talented girls there. I really like how they really hold true to that original old school style of wrestling. They're working the holds and they're getting in there and they're really showing their characters. And I think the production is something that's very unique, offered in today's wrestling. And yeah, my first thought though, when I look at these girls is, oh man, that's a lot of people to get through to my championship. But I got my eye on them all. I'm excited to get in there and start having matches with them. That's for sure.
Now, you mentioned Cody before, and you got to be part of All Out in Chicago. What a great time. What a great city. Definitely great wrestling fans. Your thoughts about being part of All Out and part of being part of the Casino Battle Royale for the women.
Well, I have so many thoughts. I mean, that was such a big moment for me in my life personally. One of the things I thought was really, really cool when I came out, I got such a huge pop from the fans, and I just thought that was the neatest, sweetest thing of them, because obviously it was a nod to my dad, and it was so big. It reminded me of watching wrestling and watching him come out and get his pops. Like, I felt I could just turn around and see him like standing there. And so that was one of the coolest moments, because it just made me think of when he comes out, like almost like reliving some of that. And my other thought on this is, I'm pretty sure, I'm looking into it. If you know otherwise, you let me know. But I'm pretty sure for my first match, I had the biggest audience in history. Most wrestlers have 20 people at their first match. No pressure at all. I think I might have a record on that one.
Yeah, no, definitely. Some people have a chance to do it in front of a small crowd. You did it in front of over 10,000 people. That was very impressive. In the ring with Awesome Kong. Just talk about the ladies there too. Did you learn anything?
Ladies, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I just felt so honored that they even had me in the ring with that level of talent for my first match. I mean, that was an incredible experience, and I didn't last as long as I was hoping to in that ring. But hey, it's my first match. Give me another one. We'll do better. But those girls. Some of those girls are no joke, and they've all been wrestling for so long. And I mean, it was just, the show from A to Z was so phenomenal. But that match I just felt humbled that I could even participate on the same level that these girls are on.
Did Cody or anyone say anything to you? I know Cody, Dusty and your dad and that history there. Did Cody say anything? Did he give you any, even if it was just like a little wink or anything? Did he say anything to you, or was it just a hectic day?
Well, he was running around in charge of everything. Like that, they have a lot of work there to be talent and to be running what they're running over there. But yeah, he did stop and say hi, and we just. I think all the legacy kids kind of feel somewhat of a bond, and we both lost our fathers near around the same time, and it was just a sweet moment, and I just thanked him for allowing me to participate, really. But one of my favorite moments is, I don't know if you know who Barry Bloom is, but he's been around in wrestling for years. Oh,
he's a huge name in wrestling business. Yes, exactly.
So he, right before I went out, he gave me advice that my dad had gave him that really actually helped me more than I realized, and I almost cried. Like, it was so special. But he just said, years ago my dad was going out, and he told him, "Hey Roddy, you be safe out there." And my dad turned to him and said, "No, that's how people get hurt. You just have to go and do it and go all out." And that is great advice. And I thought about that. I was like, don't hesitate, don't think about being safe, just go and do it. We're
talking to Teal Piper. She will make her debut for WOW Women of Wrestling very shortly now. She cannot wait. She is looking forward to that, and she's joining us here. And man, what an honor to talk to you, because we've always wanted to talk to your dad, and what an honor it is for you to kind of carry out his name this way. Talking to the Young Bucks a long time ago, they always referred to your dad, the Roddy Piper experience when you're with fans. Always take the time out to greet them, always making an experience with them, because that's what the Young Bucks kind of do. That's kind of what's led to their success, because the fans feel a connection with them. We've done meet and greets with the Bucks. They always mention your dad. They do it that way. What do you think? Why do you think the wrestlers right now, like the Bucks, or it's so important to have that connection with the wrestling fans?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say, wow, the Young Bucks are incredible, and that ladder match was amazing.
Wow, I know.
But
it's crazy.
Beyond that, I really appreciate them as talent, and I've even heard from fans. Sometimes I'll go to indie events and just watch here in Los Angeles. By the way, if you're ever at a Los Angeles indie wrestling event, I might be in the audience with you.
Yeah.
And, I've heard a lot of fans talk so highly of them, and just little things. I had one guy tell me that, his kid was going through something, and the Young Bucks gave him a bunch of free paraphernalia and really reached out because their kid was a big fan of theirs. And So I really think that they're an amazing tag team. But beyond that, I've gone several times with my dad to those autograph signings and appearances and things like that. And he would work up a sweat. He would just be dripping in sweat, shaking every possible hand. And he wouldn't care if the venue was closing. He would just, what security guard's going to kick Roddy Piper out? Like, they would just stand there so annoyed while he made sure every single fan that had been waiting in that line got their chance to meet him and give them their moment. And that meant a lot to my dad. And I think it's really cool that the Young Bucks, saw that and are doing the same, giving the same courtesy. And I certainly hope if I'm ever on either of their levels to do the same thing.
I tell you what, Teal, one thing about the wrestling fans, and obviously you interact with them, is they're very loyal. They love what your dad did. They love all that. You do something in this business, you make a impact in this business, and wrestling fans are loyal to a T, to a fault. And they're going to follow everything you do and support what you do. And, you're going to feel that love from the wrestling audience like you did in Chicago and like you're going to do in WOW. And, we just want to, wish you the very best of luck. Not luck, though, you know what I mean? Just success coming your way, too, because it's great what you're doing. And it's great to, carry on the Piper name. And one final one for me is... so Ronda Rousey, has shown tribute to your dad and showed, what a fan she was of him. Just your thoughts on Ronda Rousey in this past year and how she, carried out, and honored your dad this past year when she was in WWE full time.
Yeah, with Ronda, she made me an MMA fan. I never really watched it until her, and she just really did a lot for women in sports at that time. And then to see her come over to WrestleMania and be the first female main event wearing the Rowdy brand was just unreal. Like I have so much respect for her as an athlete and as a person. And I just, I thought that was really cool. I don't think a lot of people ask me about, wearing the kilt and wearing the shirt and all that stuff. And I don't think that's something that I need to do as a kid. It's something that if I started going down that route, it would be almost like tacky to me, like very in your face with it. And I think it's important that I establish myself as an athlete and as a good wrestler first before I ever think of doing something like that. But Ronda came into it already established as Ronda Rousey. So to me, it was really cool that she wanted to honor him in that way.
Teal, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here. And you can catch her on Women in Wrestling on Access TV. Listen, she's gonna do her dad proud, and she's gonna carry on a legacy of her own. And we thank you for your time, Teal. Thank you so much, and hope to have you on again soon here on the High Spot Podcast. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
And a special thanks goes out to Teal Piper for giving us a few minutes and gracing us with a few minutes of her time. Jeff did a great job of the interview. Of course, I'm giving Jeff compliments now because I would never give it to him to his face if he was here with me right now. So good luck, Jeff. That's congratulations on your part. Enjoyed, because it's not going to happen anytime soon. But it's a great insight on the fact that Teal, from talking about the advice she might have been given to what she plans on doing in her career, and basically kind of trying to embrace a lot of the different changes and a lot of different experiences that she is dealing with now at this stage right now. And more importantly, what I got from the whole interview, she seems really set on developing her own legacy and being her own person. And I'll steal the words from Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm sure he's not the first person that said it, but he's the one that I heard say it, and it still resonates to this day that the most successful individuals in professional wrestling, there always are a few exceptions to the rule, but they've always been the type of individuals that have taken their own personalities, just cranked the volume up to 100. It's extensions of themselves is why it becomes so authentic to the fans. It becomes so authentic to me, rather than you're portraying or trying to read lines from a script to try to convince me you're a certain person when you yourself don't believe it. Then how am I going to believe it? So Teal shows little inklings of her father in her promos and how she talks and how she presents herself to a certain degree. I'm sure that's not done intentionally. Just the fact that it's her father, you pick up this stuff as you grow up. But she's definitely hell-bent on creating her own identity. And I think that's a great thing, because most people might think of it as a disrespect. Oh, you're not trying to honor your father. But no, it's actually showing more respect, because you're trying to, not necessarily following his footsteps, but you're trying to create your own legacy using a name that you hold very prideful. So the mere fact that she's using the name Piper is a manner of respect in itself too, and she wants to be your own person, which I'm sure that everyone can relate to. In anything you do, you always will be an extension of your parents, but at the same time, you don't want to be known as, oh, you're the son or the daughter of so-and-so. You want to be your own individual. You want to be your own person and develop your own identity. And I think Teal's on her way to doing that. And what better time in terms of, like Jeff mentioned during the interview, to be not just a fan, like we talk about from a week-to-week basis, but a talent now. The ability that the women have such a huge opportunity now to showcase their skills as opposed maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And now the power of social media, you have the ability now of interacting with your fans, branding yourself. But now with the help of Women of Wrestling and now being on Access TV, that's just going to create another level of exposure for Teal and where she goes on with her wrestling career. So I wish her the absolute best. I know she's going to nail it. She just seems to be a type of person that's got a level head on her shoulders, and I can't wait to see what she does. And hopefully at one point Jeff and I can go see her perform live, because that would be awesome. We saw her for a small little taste. It was a little tease at All Out. So hopefully it won't be the last time Jeff and I get a chance to speak to her, but more importantly, get a chance to watch her perform too and see her do her thing and do it very well. And that interview is brought to you by Collar & Elbow, an apparel brand founded by Al Snow, mixing a wrestling passion with street fashion. Guys, make sure you check out all their line of clothing. Just go to collarxelbowbrand.com. Save yourself 10% on the entire online purchase just by entering promo code High Spot Podcast. So there you go. You get the chance to listen to our show, listen to some great wrestling banter back and forth, have some amazing guests, and now you get a chance to save yourself 10% going to Collar & Elbow by just entering promo code High Spot Podcast. It is that easy, guys. Show us your support. We love it. We appreciate it. And not just for me, not just the fact of you're doing it to help support the High Spot Podcast. Just think about it from this perspective. You're going to get some pretty nice clothing. Their apparel fashion line is really nice. I mean, I constantly keep wearing their hats, their shirts, their long sleeve shirts, their short sleeve shirts. They have some really nice apparel. And it's not just wrestling related. You can wear this anywhere you go and still be a fan at the same time. So it's amazing. So save yourself 10% and go and get advantage of all this great merchandise that Collar & Elbow have. So there you go, guys. In closing, it was an amazing interview. Great to have Teal Piper on the show. Kudos goes out to my tag team partner, Jeff Martin, the scoundrel, who's not here right now, but did a great job doing the interview. I couldn't have done it any better, though I know I could have. But again, Jeff, I will give you this credit for this one little moment. So enjoy it. Bask in the glory, because it's not going to last for long, okay? You get it? Got it? Good. With all that being said, guys, I am one half of the Jersey Rec Crew, the trendsetter Brian Brega, and speaking on behalf of my tag team partner, Jeff Martin. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of the High Spot Podcast. We'll be back again next week to wrap up, recap Night of Champions, and everything else going in the world of professional wrestling. So if you guys haven't figured it out by now, as much as Jeff and I strain ourselves to make sure we get an episode out every single week because we want to do it for you guys, just remember, we do this for one reason and one reason only. No, it isn't the fame, it isn't the money, because we have none of that right now. It's for you guys. It is for you, the crew.